Hey there guys, so yeah, Nick Ball versus Isaac Dogboe, final WBC eliminator. You could probably call this fight a Crossroads fight. I mean, Nick Ball is the guy who is known as the prospect. Since he beat Isaac Lowe on the Fury versus Dylan White undercard, he has been in a couple of fights defending his WBC silver title, and he's managed to get himself to the number one in the WBC rankings. And yeah, he's the guy going into this with the hype. He's the guy who is supposed to be going on to world level and fighting for world titles, and maybe to be the next featherweight champion from the UK. And Isaac Dogboe, obviously, he's been a world champion before at super bantamweight. He beat the likes of Magdaleno and Otake, and obviously he lost to Navarrete twice. And he's the guy who has been fighting at world level. He's fought at a much higher level than Nick Paul. He has fought, even in his last few fights, he's fought the likes of Robeisy Ramirez and Joet Gonzalez. But you could say that Isaac Dogboe, he's running out of chances at world level. I mean, before the Robeisy Ramirez fight, he had a couple of close fights against the likes of Joet Gonzalez and Christopher Diaz. And then he went to fight Robeisy Ramirez, and he got schooled by him. Arguably lost every single round, got knocked down in the 12th. And Robeisy Ramirez, in my opinion, is a pound for pound level fighter, but Isaac Dogboe, he didn't show anything, any renewed spirit or anything. He didn't really impress me in that fight. I just thought he sort of went through the motions. And even before that, when he was fighting the likes of Christopher Diaz, in a majority decision, or when he beat Joet Gonzalez on a split decision, a lot of people thought Joet Gonzalez had done enough to win that fight. So maybe this is last chance saloon for Isaac Dogboe. If he's to lose to Nick Ball, then maybe, he should reevaluate his career. And yeah, that's why it's a Crossroads fight. So this fight will definitely tell us a lot about Nick Ball. I'd probably say Nick Ball's best opponent so far is Lamati, who he fought in his last fight. Or Isaac Lowe. I mean, you could debate the two of them. And obviously, Isaac Lowe or Lamati, I mean, I don't think they're anywhere near world level. Isaac Lowe got battered by Bernardo Lopez, and he obviously got smashed by Nick Ball. And Lamati, I've seen him fight before. He was the IBO featherweight champion, super bantamweight champion, I believe. But I don't think he's world class fighter or anything. I think he's just your average fringe contender sort of thing. So I don't think Nick Ball has fought anyone at the level of Isaac Dogboe before. And he'll tell us a lot about him. He'll tell us about his chin. He's never really been in with a puncher. No one who he's fought so far has had a massive record of knockouts. And it'll just tell us whether he's good enough to compete at world level. It'll tell us whether he can, take the pressure from Isaac Dogboe, and he can outbox him, and it'll tell us whether he can compete with a world-class fighter. If you break down this fight, I think Nick Ball definitely has some advantages over Isaac Dogboe. I think he's definitely got better stamina. Dogboe, especially in his last few fights, has sort of gassed out. He's had Dogboe's a guy who makes a very good start in fights. You look at the Joet Gonzalez fight, for example. In the first few rounds of that fight, he probably won 4 out of 5 out of the first 5. And then, in the last fight, he probably won about 1 or 2. He's definitely a guy who comes out the blocks very fast. When he starts the fight, he has very fast hands, quite snappy punches. But by the time round 5 comes about, he's pretty gassed, to be honest, and some of the snap has been taken out of those punches. But Nick Ball, in pretty much every one of his fights, I mean, you look at the fights against Kakalolo, or you look at his fight against Lamati, it's just 12-round beatdown. He throws the same volume of punches in every round. He hasn't looked like getting tired in a fight at all so far. In those fights, he showed very good stamina, and he showed that he was able to keep up a high volume and high work rate throughout 12 rounds without getting tired. And yeah, there was the same snap on his punches in round 12 that there was in round 1. So I definitely say he's got better stamina. I think Dogboe's got slightly faster hands than Nick Ball. You look at him in some of his fights, he's got very good hand speed. But I think Nick Ball probably has a better defense. I think defensively, Nick Ball, he's quite good. He doesn't really get caught clean that often in his fights. I think Dogboe definitely gets hit a lot more. Maybe that's just the competition because he's been fighting guys who are world level, but I think Nick Ball's slightly better defensively. I think Nick Ball might hit a bit harder. I don't think Dogboe's really showed any power at featherweight. He did stop Chris Avalos, but he was pretty shot at that point. And you know, he's gone the distance in every single one of his fights at featherweight after that fight. So, and he hasn't really shown like any real power at those weights. And Nick Ball, I wouldn't say Nick Ball's like the biggest puncher in the world or anything, but he can definitely punch. I mean, he knocked down Isaac Lowe, and knocked that Mexican out in one round a couple of months ago. And he can punch. Like his power's a bit more accumulative. He breaks his opponents down, and I'd say he's probably a bit more heavy-handed than Isaac Dogboe. Dogboe's obviously a lot more experienced. He's obviously fought at world level, and he's been in with much better competition. But he's also taken a lot more damage. I mean, the Navarrete fights were quite damaging. You know, the Robeisio Ramirez fight, he didn't really win any rounds at all in that fight, and you know, he's definitely been in the harder fights. I'd say he's definitely taken a lot more damage than Nick Ball has, and I think Nick Ball is fresher. He's younger, and I think he's probably got a lot more left in the tank than Dogboe. And I think Nick Ball will probably have to be careful in the first few rounds. For the first few rounds, Isaac Dogboe, as I said, he's got very snappy punches. He can punch, and you know, when he's fresh, he's quite dangerous. So I think Nick Ball will probably have to take his time for the first few, 5 or so rounds. But after that, I think Nick Ball will probably chip away. I think he'll probably beat Isaac Dogboe. You know, sort of win the last. After the 5th round, I don't really see him having too many problems. I think Dogboe will have a good start, but I think Nick Ball will progressively start to chip away. I think he'll win all of the later rounds. And I think Nick Ball will win by a late stoppage. I see a late stoppage. I think Isaac Dogboe, he's only been stopped once in his career by Navarrete. Robeisio wasn't able to get him out of there, but Robeisio is more of a back foot boxer. I think Nick Ball will put a bit too much pressure on Isaac Dogboe for him to last the distance. And I think Nick Ball probably wins this fight by stoppage, sort of rounds 10 or 11, maybe the 12th. And yeah, that's how I see this fight. I think Isaac Dogboe's got a puncher's chance in the first 5 rounds or so. But I think Nick Ball will probably stop him late. That's what I'm going with, Nick Ball by a late stoppage. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think of this fight in the comments, and God bless.